You're listening to From the Chair, and I'm your host, Mike Hamilton. Join us each episode as we talk to athletic directors from across America. We're going to talk about topics like leadership, career development, issues of the day, and I can promise you we're going to have some fun along the way too. So sit back, listen in, and let's dive in. Let's go. All right, welcome into this week's episode. Today, our guest from Iowa State University, Director of Athletics, Jamie Pollard. Jamie, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me on, Mike. I always enjoy our friendship, and so I really appreciate you including me in this.
Hey, you know what? We go way back, right? When we both had a little bit more hair and not maybe a wrinkle here or there or whatever. So
I'm wrinkle-free. I'm losing the hair, but I think I'm wrinkle-free.
Maybe I need to know the secret. We'll talk about that offline. Hey, look, speaking of offline, I told you I wanted to visit early in this conversation about something that I find interesting. I'm a big believer in consistency in leadership and consistency in management being a key indicator of success for a program, a business, nonprofits, any endeavor. And certainly when you look at your tenure there at Ames, there's been unbelievable consistency, particularly in your chair. I think now you're entering your 17th year. And I'm curious, I know a lot of that goes to your success and how you manage your business. I know a lot of it goes to the type place you're at and the leadership that you have around you. Maybe before we talk about where the industry is, let's talk briefly about what do you see in terms of the setting that you inherited there at Iowa State that's allowed you to maintain the consistent presence in leadership for such a time?
Well, I think really what's developed over time is just a really strong culture. And it's a culture that fits who I am as a person and the people that we've brought into the culture that have stayed, and whether it's our coaches or other staff members, just really understand what it is to be in Ames, Iowa. And, there's pros and cons of any place, but at a place like Ames, Iowa, having a culture that's been able to be sustained for a considerable amount of time is the reason that we're able to have the success that we have. It's hard for us to generate the instant revenues and some of the things that some other programs can kind of turn on and shut off. At Iowa State, it's just been a slow, steady climb. And so having consistency really eliminates a lot of those little hiccups you get along the way that set you back.
So look, you've had a track record of incredible success. You're highly regarded in this industry, and I'm certain, without putting you on any kind of spot, you've had chances to move on to other places from time to time. But yet you've said, hey, this is the place I want to be. And I'm curious, why is that a fit for you and for Ellen and your family? What makes Ames, Iowa, and Iowa State the special place for you that continues to have you say, hey, this is a fit for me and this is where I am?
Well, it starts with the people, just from top to bottom, whether it's our fans, the people on campus, the people I get to work with in the department. They share a lot of those same values. I mean, our head football coach is coaching his 7th grade daughter's softball team. I mean, you don't see that everywhere. But also for me, back when we took this job 17 years ago, it fit what matters to Jamie Pollard and our family. And we wanted to be in a college town, but we wanted to be in a non-metro area. And I wanted a place where I could be a world-class AD, but also a world-class dad and be involved in my kids' activities and, be able to go, as coach does, go coach your kid's softball game and then get back to the office if you need to be. And then really be at a program that, quite frankly, thought had its best years ahead. And I still feel that way. And that's one of the reasons I'm still here is there's still a lot of firsts to be had at a place like Iowa State. And it's been really fun to have your fingerprints on those firsts. And those things have all mattered for me and for a lot of the people that work in our department.
It's funny. I draw the analogy. Sometimes you train different for a sprint than you do for long distance, right? And you won a national championship in Division III in the 5,000, and your son's been incredibly successful. Your wife's a runner, and so you know what it takes to train for the long haul. And certainly the way you have managed your business there is a long haul plan, right? And you mentioned the idea that you've been building something all along, and the last couple of years you've had an additional surge in the Learfield Directors Cup, and I think I read that maybe it's conceivable that you could have your highest finish ever this year. So, what has it taken to build that kind of momentum over time and to exercise patience along the way too, right? Because I know your competitive streak. I've been around you enough, but you've had to be patient to build it the right way, and you've done it the right way. Talk a little bit about that if you don't mind.
Well, I would say first, I've taken great pride in saying we make decisions at Iowa State in our athletics program that are sustainable. And when I say that, I'm not talking like build green. What I'm talking about is making decisions that when that decision comes home to roost, so to speak, if you're still here, are you going to be happy you made that decision? And Mike, there's a lot of people in this business that make a lot of decisions knowing full well they're going to move on from it. And they won't be there when, either the damage is done or someone's got to call the question. And I've always prided myself in saying, if I'm the person that's still here when that decision has to be, answered for, then am I going to be glad I made that decision? And that philosophy has really worked. And it's we've coined it a lot with our development world and our ticket world of, we don't ask for what we can get, we ask for what we need. And then we try to articulate what those needs are to our constituents. And that philosophy has worked really well for us because it's allowed us to build a foundation and then advance from that foundation. And it's no different than building a house. You're not going to build a house on a really weak foundation. It'll crumble eventually. And I feel like we've built a real solid footings, and we've just been very methodical and deliberate and intentional about what we're doing. Make no bones about it, though. You said it. I'm as competitive as the next guy, and a lot of things don't happen as quickly as I would like. And that does take patience, which I have very little of. But that's also another reason I've stayed here. I've told many, as I've gone through 3 presidents, and every time that a new president's come in, they've always asked, what makes this place, what gives us a fighting chance? And I've always said that if we can make a decision in the morning and implement it in the afternoon, we got a fighting chance. And there's not a lot of bureaucracy at Iowa State. And that also has been a big advantage for us being able to consistently build something.
Hey, look, cherish that, right? Because there are a lot of places where every answer starts with no, and then you have to work your way towards yes. And so if you've got a place that's leaning in, that's something to be garnered and happy about. You made the mention of I want to dive in on this for just a second about not asking for what you can get, but for what you need. One of the things that I've admired that you have done over time is you've been I'll call it highly specific in detailing budget scenarios and operating expenses and revenue and that kind of thing. And I'm not sure how frequently you do that with your fan base, but it's been something that I've seen regularly, right? So do you first of all, how frequently do you do that with your fan base?
Oh, I don't know if there's been a frequency, Mike. It's been more on an as needed basis. It's born out of, first, my background. I was a CPA. I always liked, and I'll show this, I keep it in my drawer here, just in case you have to kind of right set the room. I always keep my little green visor. But I was an accountant by trade, and I think that analytical ability, or the way of just how you think about approaching problems, so much of what triggers a lot of our solutions is resources, right? And so being able to articulate that to your constituencies or to your staff has just been something that I've always just done. And I never really looked at it as a skill. It's just something, that's who I am. That's how I explain things. I'm very black and white about my decision making. And what happened during COVID is you had to start communicating through video and other methods. And that took off for us. And it was well received by our constituents. And so we've used it more recently when we've wanted to help articulate why we're going to do something.
I want to ask one more specific question about some of this culture around Iowa State athletics, and then I want to shift to a couple of industry-related topics. And this one relates to Matt Campbell. Matt has done an unbelievable job. You've given him the right kind of support. I've seen your new football building and the other things that you've done to support your program. And his name gets tossed around a lot for NFL openings and the like, and yet he has maintained his desire to stay there at Iowa State. I found that a lot of times when I talked to some of the coaches that I was able to work with, we talked, at the end of the year, we started talking about contract extensions or whatever. One of the pieces of information I always said was, is this a business transaction or is this a partnership? Because if it's, depending on how you answer that question, it will change the context of our conversation, right? And my sense is that you and Matt have a partnership. Is that true?
No doubt. No doubt. And it goes back to when we interviewed him 6 years ago, I believe it was. That was one of my closing questions. There was another Power 5 school that was courting him. And I flat out asked him, I said, and I knew he was going to leave Toledo. He just felt it was time. And I asked him, I said, is your next job a transaction or is it a calling? Because if it's a transaction, go take the other job because they'll pay you more and it will be an easier transaction. But if you're doing something for a calling because you really holistically want to make a difference in people's lives, then come to Iowa State, because if you're as successful as I think you can be, you'll be beloved. We'll build a statue. There's things that have never been achieved that you'd get to be the person that does. You'll be the first footprints up that mountain. And in hindsight, he wanted more of it to be a passion, and so it wasn't a transaction. And so, but that started wasn't even day one. It started, in the interview.
That's great. I'd love for you to share a little bit about your new football building with the folks that listen, because what I would say on my visit, and you got to remember, I came in there, I don't know, right near the finishing touches. I haven't yet seen the actual finished product. I've heard a lot about it. I've seen the pictures. What I would say about your building is, first of all, you did it right. The walking around the building and you telling me the different pieces to the puzzle, I can see that there was a lot of thought put into the building. I would also say that, and I don't want this to be offended, I hope you'll appreciate this, you didn't do it over the top. You did it the right way. You did it in a first-class manner, but you didn't go over the top. And in fact, in some ways, I would say it fits your culture, right? So I'm curious, how have you seen that as a help in the recruiting process? Do you think it has signaled things to your football team and your fans that you'd hoped it would signal? Any comments on the new building?
Well, whenever you have something new, it's always going to help in recruiting in the initial phase. But to me, the biggest benefit of it, it's centralized everything. It's a very efficient building with where academics is located in comparison to the dining hall, which is in comparison to all the strength and conditioning and the student affairs areas, and then locker rooms and the grab and go. It just lays out extremely well. You're right. It has all the bells and whistles that you need, but it maybe doesn't, when you're in it, look like a Taj Mahal as some have built. And quite frankly, that's the Iowa State way. I mean, number one, we wouldn't have the funding to build, the Taj Mahal. But secondly, it's just not what our donors would see. It's just not what they would be looking for us to do. And yet it was still, the largest building ever built on the Iowa State campus, most expensive and largest in terms of just square footage. So it's a mammoth building. It has great stature when you come on campus. It's right in the front of the football stadium, so it screams wow, but I would say it's just very efficient, and the users were very involved, from student athletes to coaches, helping us design it.
Yeah, the glass on the front of the building, candidly, the locker room, is kind of tricked out, right? It's a very, very nice locker room.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because we went and toured many facilities, and Coach Campbell wanted something that would be kind of our when someone left here, what would they remember? And there's places that have putt-putts, there's places that have their movie, you name it. And what Coach really wanted was, we call it the eye of the storm. And, being a Cyclone, that matters. But inside the locker room where the players congregate, we really tripped it out kind of in almost like a little bit of an IMAX area for them to feel like it was their space, but has huge wow factor when you would bring a football recruit into that space. And that's what Coach Campbell wanted, and it worked really well for us.
So you take your stadium and the new football building and you head towards Hilton Coliseum. And there's been conversation now for a number of months talking about what that's going to look like at some point. And then also you're talking about doing, I assume you're still talking about doing some renovations at Hilton as well, taking a building that's been around for a long time but has unbelievable and a rich history. What's the latest on, I can't remember exactly what you're calling it, Jamie, but I call it your commercial and residential district that you're building between the football stadium and basketball?
So the official name is called CyTown. And we've worked really closely with the Green Bay Packers. So if anybody's a Packer fan out there, it's modeled after Titletown. We've spent a lot of time with them and both their layout, but also their business model. We just got approval from the Board of Regents last week for the first phase infrastructure. So it's $25 million of putting the utilities under the parking lots and buttoning it all back up so that we can start going vertical above it. And we've got a couple of initial tenants lined up. We're just waiting to be able to package it together with a couple other tenants to get the best bang for our buck when we announce. But we will break ground after football this fall to start on the infrastructure. And that infrastructure had to get put in before we could go vertical. But it is a really fun project. It's been something for me at this stage in my career to sink my teeth into that is vastly different than what we're dealing with on a daily basis of NIL and pay for play and transformation committee and college football playoff and realignment and onboarding new members. It's a welcome relief for me to walk into a room with city representatives and developers and be talking about basically a major development project between our football and basketball complexes that is a classic P3 project. And it's a project that is being done not only for the benefit of athletics, but for campus and the community. And the capstone of that will be renovating the basketball arena, which is on the far end of the project, or far end of the site. So it's coming together nicely. It got a little setback by COVID just because retail business got set back during that time period. So we're a little further behind than I would like to be, but at the same time, we're breaking ground, which is exciting.
I think it's very forward thinking. The reality is there are a number of places around the country that have the opportunity to maybe look at some type of district around their athletic facilities. Maybe fewer than more, but I do think there are some places where that's possible. It certainly makes a lot of sense in Ames. Hey, so look, I'm going to pivot for just a second. I think you're really good to address this next topic. Let's back up for a second. You and I have known each other for a long time. I know you to be a very measured person. I believe you can provide perspective to things. You yourself have had a couple of medical things over time. You've survived a heart attack. You've survived cancer. You've got a son who's survived cancer on multiple occasions. That puts life in perspective, right? You've been in the business for the length of time you have, and you've made some comments in the last couple of weeks about some of the leadership around the NCAA track regional. That we can talk about that if we want to do that, because I think this is part of a broader context I'm headed towards here. And then I was telling you today, ADU and D1 Ticker released a study saying that there's this overarching disengagement, burnout, exhaustion in the industry, particularly in those who have been in the roles 5 years or more. There's a lot there that I just said, but I believe that you have the ability to, again, you're a measured guy, to put some of that in perspective because of your own personal history and your time in the industry. And this is a time where people need to hear from folks they trust that are in leadership roles to give them some assurance that Not necessarily, I'm not saying, hey, make sure tell everybody it's okay. I'm not asking you to say that. We know that there's vast change coming on a number of different fronts, but you've seen a lot, right? And I'm interested in just your perspective from having been through a lot as well.
Well, it's a cliche, but it's never as bad as it looks, and it's never as good as it feels. And that's no different right now. The waters are really choppy, and it can be so easy to just let yourself drown in the choppy waters and, make yourself miserable. And I choose not to do that, even though, I have a pit in my stomach about where this is all heading. But, I saw that quote from I think it's 1929 about the Carnegie Foundation, and when they did a study of college athletics. And so, that's, almost 100 years ago. And they had three findings in the 1920s about college athletics at the time. And the first finding was student athletes aren't students. Second finding was coaches are paid too much. And the third finding was the only way we're going to be able to move forward is to have government intervention. And those three things, you could say today, if you pulled it out of the time capsule, you'd go, wow, they were predicting 2022. And so I share that, more as just a backdrop for folks to say, we'll get through this. It's clearly not going to look like it looks today. But you know what? It doesn't look like when I started in 2005 as AD, and it certainly doesn't look like what it looked like in 1989 when I got my first job in college athletics. And so I think you got to play the long game. Unfortunately, because of just our society and the immediacy of everybody having a platform now to comment, everything just has such a heightened awareness and a heightened hysteria around it. And you start to believe, even though you're in the 99%, you start thinking you're in the 1%. And the last week and 4 weeks ago when we had Big 12 meetings, it was so refreshing to be in a room with my peers and know they have the same anxieties as I do and the same concerns and the same false understandings. We laughed at the Big 12 meetings last week and said, if I was doing everything we're accused of doing at Iowa State, there'd be no athletes ever leaving Iowa State because we'd already be paying them. And we all kind of said that about each other. We all go, well, you're doing pay for play, and that's why you're getting athletes, and so it's everyone's going on hysteria rumors, and I think it just has made the water so much more choppy about what we think's happening in our profession. Calmer heads will prevail. I don't want to wish away time, Mike, but I would like to get 2 or 3 years down the road and look back about what we thought today, because I'm not certain it's going to turn out anything like some of the people keep predicting it's going to turn out. And so time will tell, right?
Yeah, it's easy to run around, like Chicken Little, the sky is falling, right? When you're in the middle of it. But you have made some comments in the press within the last couple of weeks related to the transfer portal, and I will say maybe you had a different opinion early on related to the portal, but then you've actually seen the positive effects as it relates to your programs at Iowa State and the benefit of that. And I know of a couple of my friends who coach basketball who have had the benefits of the portal, and there's been a balance, and you found out where you fit, right? And then you look at NIL, and the different iterations of that just in the last 12 months, but yet more that we see on the horizon coming in terms of, will there be, what is this pay for play thing? I mean, is it really pay for play? We were not opposed to name, image, and likeness, but it's kind of gotten away from that. Will the market come back to us a little bit as it relates to how business people who are pouring money into collectives look at return on investment? There's a lot to happen yet, right? And it will happen over time. And so I think you're right in that it's not the end of time. But yet these are the times where leaders need to lead.
Well, think of this, Mike. In 2012, so when we recently just went through Texas and Oklahoma announcing they're leaving, I was the only athletics director of the 8 remaining schools or president that was in the room in 2012 when Nebraska, A&M, Colorado, and Missouri left the Big 12. And I'm here to tell you, in 2012, I thought the Iowa State ship was sinking. I was approached by one of our well-known headhunters who had a job for me, who said, "You got to take this AD's job. You don't even have to interview; they'll hire you, because that ship's going to sink." And I remember telling him, "I can't jump off the ship if it's going to sink, because that would contradict everything I've stood for as a leader. What am I going to tell those coaches and anybody that just started, that I'm jumping?" If you would have told me at that moment in time, because it felt like doomsday for Iowa State University, if you would have told me that 10 years later in 2022, we just would have finished the most robust 10 years in the history of our institution in terms of finances, enrollment, athletic and academic achievement, and that we'd have built tremendous amount of facilities and positioned ourselves for the next decade, I would have said, who are you kidding? There's no way that's going to happen. And it did happen. And so I use that same analogy when Texas and Oklahoma left. I can't tell you that 10 years from now, we won't say that's the best thing that ever happened to Iowa State, because the new Big 12 ended up being a boom. And so I think that there's some messages there that could be used in what we're talking about with the uncharted future of NIL, pay for play, transformation committee, conference realignment, college football breakaway from the NCAA. All those things seem like doomsday to our industry. And maybe 10 years from now, we'll look back and go, gosh, that was the best thing that ever happened, because it totally transformed our industry to a better space.
That's great stuff. Hey, let me shift gears on you before we wrap up here, and that's I told you I wanted to visit with you just briefly about NACDA, and so if you're listening to this, you may go, "What? Why are you all of a sudden shifting to NACDA?" Well, Jamie's you're the president of NACDA this year, and we are timing this particular broadcast leading into NACDA, and I know at this point, obviously, the program's baked, and a lot of folks hopefully have made their reservations to be in Vegas with all of us. I know you guys have made some tweaks to the programming. I think you've condensed the programming. When we head to Vegas in just a matter of a couple of weeks, what can we expect to see when we get there from NACDA?
Well, first of all, it's in some ways a historic event, because it'll be the first time that we're all together in 3 years. It'll be the first condensed version of NACDA, and what that means is all the programming is condensed into a 3.5-day time period, so everybody will be there at once, instead of having some groups that had to come in on the beginning and other groups came in on the back end. And we're able to do that in Las Vegas just because they have the room availability. We already have 5,000 attendees signed up, which is a record. We have 14,000 room nights we're taking in Las Vegas. So it's going to be a great convention. And then on top of it, we've lined up some great programming. We're going to have Robert Gates speaking with Chris Howard as the moderator, and great insight on just his time that he came to help the NCAA. We're going to have a celebration of the 50th anniversary of Title IX and an incredible panel of female former athletes and administrators that will help speak into that great topic. And then we're going to have all the top leaders from the Transformation Committee, from Greg Sankey and Julie Cromer and Gloria Navaz and Pat Chun and Javon Adams-Gaston, all there in person to talk about what's about to come from the Transformation Committee, which is, no pun intended, but is intended to transform the future of college athletics as we know it. And then beyond that, we have all the great programming from all the 17 different affiliates that are all part of, the 22,000 members that are part of the NACDA total umbrella. So I'm really excited. I'm proud and honored to be the president this past year, and to be the president when we go to Las Vegas for the first time, and first time to convene as a group in 3 years. So if you haven't already signed up, I strongly encourage you to do that, because I think you're going to miss out on an incredible opportunity to spend time with your peers from all walks of college athletics.
Well, those guys, they have a small staff, as you know, but they rely heavily on athletic directors and others in the industry to help them formulate programming, and the performance on the ground in terms of delivery is nothing short of incredible. And look, Learfield is heavily engaged with NACDA. I've been heavily engaged with NACDA over my career. You have been heavily engaged. Why does NACDA matter? Why does it still matter in 2022?
Well, it's the glue that holds us all together, from just being able to have the camaraderie and share the stories and experiences, whether you're Division 1, 2, 3, NAI, it doesn't matter. You're all part of the NACDA family as athletic administrators in some form or fashion. And, you mentioned, you've been doing it for years. I've been doing it for years. I can remember Debbie Yao introducing me to NACDA way back in 1989 when I was at St. Louis University. And, when I think of the leaders that led college athletics at that time, they were icons, and I looked up to them, and I tried to glean information from them. And, now, Mike, we're those people, all these years later, 30 some years later. And so I look at it as also a sense of responsibility to give back to the young people that are just starting out. I need to make sure that those young people are doing this 30 years from now like I am, because they're our future. And so to make sure we give back and continue to be, continuous learners, there's always something we can learn about. And NACDA is just one of the great platforms to do that.
No doubt, man. Hey, great professional development, incredible opportunity to build relationships, and relationships that will be informative to all of us in our careers for a long, long time. It's always great to be able to pick up the phone and call somebody who's in a similar situation or may have experienced something in a like-minded institution or whatever, and you can certainly find that connectivity by being at NACDA. So we'll look forward to seeing you out there in a few weeks. And Jamie, you have we could do a Jamie Pollard part 2, by the way, and maybe we'll just have to do that before too long. But I really appreciate you coming on today and spending a few minutes with me.
Well, Mike, I appreciate this service that you provide to our industry, and I'm honored that you chose to have me be the guest today. And I look forward to seeing you in Las Vegas at the end of the month.
Sounds great. So listen, guys, folks, this we're actually doing something different at NACDA. We're actually going to take From the Chair live to NACDA this year. We're going to be recording some sessions. Two people on a stage together versus on a screen. So look forward to. We'll let you know where those sessions are going to be, and we invite you to stop by and say hello as we interview 6 or 8 folks there in Vegas live at the time. I thank Jamie for coming on today to not only talk about Iowa State athletics and his perspective on college athletics, but obviously to talk a little bit about NACDA, since that is such an important thing coming up here in a couple of weeks for our industry. Remind you again that we broadcast every Wednesday across all podcast platforms. You can also watch it in video form on YouTube. I thank you for joining us, and this has been From the Chair with your host, Mike Hamilton, and we'll see you next time.